right, so CSS Fundamentals 2. So what I want to go over is a little bit more intermediate stuff than intro stuff. So we already talked yesterday about specificity. Say that 10 times, right? I bet you can't. Specificity with the rankings. Basically how there is a ranking and top to bottom there's that cascade. That was kind of more intermediate, to be honest. But following that, a little bit of grouping and nesting. Shorthand properties, we already talked a little bit about that. Pseudo classes and elements for different types of hover and different kind of interaction events. And then how, if we're going to be dealing with CSS, how do we display elements? Inline versus block versus none, those kind of things. And some other type of, maybe we'll look at some other selectors as well. So grouping and nesting, I think we touched on it a little bit. So basically with your selectors, you can group them in this kind of way. You can simplify your code both in HTML and CSS to make it easier to manage. So you can see on the left, you can have all these different types of selectors, but they all have a common property, and the common property is red. So in that scenario, you could, in fact, roll them all up and basically separate them by a comma so that you can apply the same styles. So we're basically grouping them and making them simplified. So you can see there are 10 lines of code reverted to 2 lines of code. So that makes it a lot easier to read. So nesting. Nesting is a way of kind of targeting your HTML. So if the CSS is really structured well, there shouldn't be a need to use many class or ID selectors. I have to say I can be guilty of this sometimes. I remember some code I worked on. I used I just used classes. I was like throwing classes on everything. It's not wrong. It's just saying if you get really good at selectors, you may not always need to put classes on everything. You can target it through getting really smart with how you select things. So let's look at this here. We have some markup that on the right, there's a divider tag with an ID of top, and it has these nested child tags. And you can remember if you were to draw a tree out, you would have that div tag sitting up front as the parent, and then down the branch, you would have 3 branches. One would be an H1 tag, one would be a P tag, and another one would be a P tag. There is no other branches, so that would be one level of branching, right? So one level from the parent. So basically, in this scenario, we could target very simply by ID. We're going to grab the top, this guy here, and we're going to give it a background of white, some padding, and then we are going to grab these nested values by saying, okay, we'll grab the top element, grab the element, whatever it is, that has an ID of top, and it's H1, it's headers. So it'll grab this ID, which hopefully is unique, and it's going to select this nested element. It's going to give it a different color. And then let's go ahead and going to grab another element inside of there, and if there happens to be a paragraph, then select it in that way. So you can see here we don't have to put classes on everything, which is kind of cleaner if you know how to do nesting selectors. It makes the markup less noisy. But like I said, it takes practice, like to actually be able to select the children and the grandchildren branches and those kind of things. Nesting, it takes a little bit of practice. Like I said, I can be honest. When I was learning CSS, I did not do it this way. I would put classes on every element, and that's not wrong. That is not wrong, right? So you can certainly do that if you are starting out and you just want to make it appear. If it's giving you trouble and you want to basically be bulletproof with how you're doing things, you can certainly do that. All right, so you can kind of see here. Let's just view this quickly and make sure it works. You can always right-click and reveal in File Explorer, so we can go right to that folder. And if we actually want to look at this, we want to look at this, open with I always open with Chrome. You know, we can kind of see not the best design, but hey, it's doing what we want here. If we were to take a look at this code here. All right, so in the CSS, you can see right here, we basically group these selectors. So that takes care of all of these, this right here, right, in the markup. We inspect the markup. We inspect that markup here. You can see it's the first header, the paragraph, and all that. And then we have this section here that's being targeted here. This div. If you notice, I'm hovering over it, and you can see I already have this box model around it. You can see here that I have padding around everything. It gives me the content height and width, and then each element will have that padding to it. So what do? We added this 1EM. So that's what that looks like. That 1EM looks like this, that padding around this element here. We inspect the padding here. 1EM is certainly different than 1 pixel, right? You can see there, if I go 1 pixel, it's not very big, all actually, whereas opposed to 1EM is very big. You can see there, if I do 10EM, it'll probably be quite large, quite huge, right? Look at that, as a scope compared to 10 pixels. So we know that very big, you know, basically very big width and height, right, relative to the element. So a way of breaking it out, but you know, you might have these classes here where, you know, what happens, you know, maybe one of these classes have more than just the red. So maybe, you know, you might, it's when you're organizing things, right? Like the second class might have more than just the red background. It could have, it's basically barking at us right now. It's already saying that, hey, it's already, well, first of all, don't use an empty rule set. So maybe we want to put a border on it, solid. We want to be blue. This one will overwrite that one, I believe. So let's run it. Will it blend the styles, or will it be smart enough? So it does. So it does actually. So what would happen there if we look at the CSS? You can see here that okay, this second class was applies these properties, but in this grouped one, it's also there as well. So it combined them as well, right? So all of these are red, which is good. But at the same time, if we wanted to go to each element there and do a little bit more, we can certainly keep this up here. But then if we needed to add some other pieces to it, right? Like padding, we want 10 pixels, and we want, I don't know, we want a color of this one. We want a color of black, or I don't know. We want a color of. And we want to change the color, but then we could, if we did that, we could remove this guy from here because we don't need that color anymore. So you're always going to run into a situation where you are trying to extract pieces out, and as you're designing, you might say, okay, well, I don't need this anymore, so therefore I remove this class here. And this one, it goes off on its own and has some customization that it only needs, right? So you're constantly going to be reorganizing your styling based on what you need, and reorganizing things a lot based on the needs of your site. And this is only a little bit of CSS. You can only imagine when you get into very big styling how you need to minimize things and how you need to organize your work. All right, so that's nesting of some selectors and grouping to simplify things. Another one we touched on was shorthand properties. If you're not used to CSS, you won't sometimes you look at things and be like, why do those properties look in that way when other properties only have one value, right? So it's basically you're looking at a shorthand. And from first glance, you might think, well, some of these properties just are different than others. It's just basically a way of you know, reducing the number of properties and representing them via spaces. So you could have margin and padding as a common one. You can see you can basically combine all of these on the right. You can see margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left. can be simplified in one line. However, when you do the short form, you sometimes need to look it up. Like sometimes I need to look it up, right? The first one is top. Sometimes I get mistaken, right? The second and third positions, but top, right, bottom, left. That's basically what this is doing, right? So it's the same thing. You'll see some CSS, whether it be generated or some designers like to write it out explicitly. Nothing wrong with that. It's just you know, maybe you need to do it, but because the short form is maybe unreadable to you, and that's fine. It's just a way of minimizing things, right? So if you just stated two values, it would just be the first value will be the top and bottom. On the second value will be right, left. By stating two values, so it kind of changes a bit. So you need to look up. It's a little tricky, right? You need to look up the margin property itself and see when you have all four, it's top, right, bottom, left. But when you have two, it may actually change. So one way, you know, you have to decide what's best for you. Same with border as well. Can be used the same way as padding and margin. You can combine border width, border color, border style. So here you can write them explicitly. And we've already done this, right? You already see me write in this way. I'm used to this style just because I've done it so much. You might actually see it'd be smart enough to figure out that if solid is here or it's on the other side, it'll pick it up. But know that, you know, you can reduce this code a lot if you need to. Fonts as well. Sometimes you'll see a lot of this, but it can all be minimized, right? So all these font-related properties can be grouped together. Style, width, height, line, and family here can be written in one line here. So this is a interesting one here. I don't use this one very much. So you can see here is the style. This is the weight, and then the font size with the /2. I've never really done that one, to be honest. So that would make you do a double take. And again, if you're new to CSS, maybe this way makes more sense to you when you're building your styling out, right? So if we were to look at this one here, this markup is pretty straightforward. If we bear with me here, if I go to this example and I go to view it in browser, right click and view with my Chrome, take a look at this here. So you can kind of tell some stuff's going on in there. So what does that look like? So you can see here we have three. So we have three paragraphs, and they're basically defining the element 3 times, which is not the greatest, right? So if we take a look at the markup on that, what does that look like if we look at CSS? And you can see that the styles there, it basically defines, okay, paragraph, apply this font, which is the that kind of italicized courier, right? That type graph, it looks like a typewriter did that. Apply a border to it, I can turn it off or turn it on. Apply a margin to it, turn it off, turn it on. I can look at the box model. It says the border has one pixel around it, you can see there. And then you can see also the margin has one, okay, so it has 1 on the right, on the top, 5 on the right, 10 on the bottom, 20 on the left. So if you ever are confused by these, you can always inspect the box model and see where the corresponding numbers end up, right? So it may be surprised because sometimes you may get it flipped. And if you don't have a border on it, you will be lost. Why do these elements kind of override each other? Why is, you know, because again, CSS debugging, you can put borders around things. It's very good just to visualize what's happening with those boxes. But again, we don't want this. We don't want three definitions of a style. That not really the greatest thing, right? You can see here all the styles, and then you can see that by default, the paragraph has its own default style, the user agent style sheet, which is a block style. We'll get to that in a second. Block start and end, and then an inline start. So that's some styles we want to maybe leave, maybe not, but we can't inline. We can't cancel them. We have to override them if we wanted to. If we want to do that. So we certainly don't want this. If anything, we want to, we want to extract all this out into one definition. At the very most, we would like to clean all this up, right? Put all this in one definition because it makes for the CSS a lot cleaner. If we refresh the page, it should be the same. But you can see now the markup is a lot better, right? It's basically one definition with all those properties inside. The render hasn't really changed. It's just how the styles are computed, right? If we wanted to get a little bit more, if we wanted to put it in depth, if we wanted to add some more properties to it and put it all together, again, this is the CSS comment, right? Just /star /asterisk. So here we change the appearance of things a little bit more. What does it look like if I refresh? It kind of looks okay, cool. Maybe not. It kind of puts a border, which is kind of a pretty annoying actually, the color scheme. But you can see it has that bevel on the side. So we have the font is now times. We know now it's the font weight and the line height is the slash. Some padding around it. We'll put a little bit more padding so we can see. If we don't remember what the short form looks like for padding, we could inspect the box model and look at it. We can see there that the padding is, because we have only two elements now, I guess it does this. It does 30 on the top and bottom, 10 on the right and left. So basically, if we're not specifying left and right, it's not leaving it at 0. It is actually applying top, bottom, left, right. You can kind of see that there. Border width is a little bit, basically, what is that border width? So you can kind of see here the border. It's giving 1 on the top, 5 on the left, 5 on the bottom, 1 on the left. So that's, yeah. Again, it's not intuitive. Sometimes you need to inspect it. And then basically by being explicit now with border color, we are giving different colors for each one of those border sides. The red, green, blue, yellow, and because the right side and the left side have a little bit of a thicker border, it gives that appearance, right? It's kind of got that what do you call it? That bevel or something like that. So it looks like a button that can be clicked, a little bit 3D, it pops out. And then of course the margins, 2 parameters. So yeah, that's a way of putting it all together, and that is grouping our styles in a much better way. Shorthand and using shorthand properties. All right, so another interesting one is pseudo classes. And pseudo classes, let's take a look at some pseudo classes for 1 second here. Okay, so you may see this and it may be newer to you. When I first saw it, maybe I wasn't entirely sure with some of the stuff, not the pseudo classes, but the pseudo elements. So let me click forward here. So pseudo classes are basically stuck on or bolted onto selectors to specify a state or a relation to the selector. So in a very simple example there, you could actually have a link that is active. I might have showed you with the text box, search box I worked on. You can have an active state, you can have a hover state, and you can have a visited state. So if you're doing a link and you were clicking on it, or just it's active, meaning it hasn't been visited, you hover over it, it changes color, and then when you click it, basically the UI will signal to the user that these links were visited. I'm sure you already understand this. But anyhow, it takes kind of form as a selector. It could be P with this semicolon, this colon, sorry, and the class. And then you put your properties inside. So it's basically a colon in between the selector and the pseudo classes. It's a little different when you first look at it. You might not understand what it is. But it basically looks like this. So you can have, and we may have looked at this the other day. So it kind of has this element, the element selector, and then you have the colon, and then you have the pseudo class, right? So So you could target a link and give it a blue color by default, and you could target a visited link and give it a appearance of purple. So you could tell on a web page how many links the user has clicked or not in that way. So they're kind of like, so these are dynamic pseudo classes. So common use for links, the dynamic pseudo classes can be used to apply styles when something happens. So if we had these boxes here, very often when you hover over something, the cursor will change. So you can control the cursor from the point to like a hand, right? To actually give the cursor or the pointer a little bit of a different change. To signal, hey, that this element, it's not a button, but you can actually, you can click it or do some action on it. So to the user, you can control this when you're doing your styling. So these are called active, these are called states. So in this example, you could do an active. So active is when something is activated by the user, like you click on something, or maybe you type in something, right? Hover is when something is passed over by an input for the user, like a cursor move. And then there's something called focus. So focus is when the element is ready for keyboard input. So it's kind of interesting to actually look at this stuff. So if you were to look at the desktop here, I'll just scroll this down to the bottom. And how do I want to get out of this responsive? I want to go back. Sorry, I want to go back to the desktop view just to show you. Even this one here, when I hover over this, let's get out of this inspection thing. I hover over it. You can see the cursor changes from a pointer to kind of like something to indicate you can type into it. And you can see the border has changed to black. You can see the text has changed to black when it's not. When I actually click inside of it, it's still active. The focus is inside. When I type though, you can see the text change from black to something else, right? So you can actually control, like, now this is active, or it's ready. So it's basically gone to the active state. So this one actually has some JavaScript involved, right, to kind of control some of this stuff. But yeah, like this is basically has some Java code in there to track whether you're using keyboard tabbing and stuff like that. So maybe it's got a little bit more complexity than normal. So if we simply highlighted this image here, all right, this guy right here. I told you in your dev tools, you can access these element states by clicking on this. There's element states and element classes. So let's look at the states. You can see it'll give you a bunch of element states: active, focus, focus within, visited, hover, and focus visible. If we click hover, you can see it kind of changes appearance. It fills in. If we click active, it changes to gray. If it's focus, nothing. Focus within, nothing. Visible. So that one also has some extra coding around it. It should eventually have that same type of dotted line that this has. When we click onto this, it should have a focus somewhere in here. Actually, again, they're all protected by the tab key, right? When we tab into it, it should give us this kind of appearance here, that tab border. But anyhow, that's some active states. So how do you do that here? Okay, so first of all, here is a bunch of different selectors. You have an active selector, so you can do it in this manner here, and then we have a check. So when you're dealing with checkboxes, you can actually target the inputs that are checked. So select every checked input. Everything that's disabled, so this input colon disabled will select every disabled input element. Hover, all right, so selects links on mouse over. So this is like a generic pseudo class for links. And then we can look at some examples for first and last child. So there's a way of selecting every first child of a paragraph. So it could be anything. So now when you get into those kind of selectors, they can be very broad. So you could have a paragraph, and it doesn't matter what the first element is. It could be another paragraph. It could be a divider tag. It could be whatever it is. You're basically saying that, okay, I'm going to select whatever first child of a paragraph is, and I'm going to do something to it. Maybe I want to highlight the first element. At the same time, I can also select the last child of every element. In fact, I could select the last child of every table if I wanted to target a footer, and maybe I want to highlight the last row of a table. I could use something like this, right? I could say the last child of a table, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to give it a blue background with white text, and that'll basically, maybe that footer is totals. Maybe it has a totals, and there's some pricing in there, some calculation that I want to make very visible that is a calculation that everyone should pay attention to. So I could do that as well. And of case focus. Focus is when the element has focus. So sometimes active focus and focus within, you may need to read a little bit about that, but there's a distinction between them. These are all the pseudo classes that you can use. All right, so let me take a little example here. If I had a pseudo class, so if I have, let's see what this looks like here. I want to do that. To that demo there is pseudo classes, and let's take a look at that link. And I think we got some stuff going on in there. So, so if I hover over the link, you can see it should change. So as I hover, you can see that the cursor changes to a hand, and you can see the background changes to yellow. If I were to click it, it should be purple now. You can see it's purple. If I click into, so these have no hover states, but if I click into this text box here, background will change. If I type into it, nothing happens. If I click into this background, that changes as well. And so, and when I hover out of it or the focus leaves it, it changes back to default, right? So how do we accomplish that? So you can see in the markup we have anchor tag, an input tag, and a text area. So in our CSS, that is an external style sheet. Let's see what we got. So at the front, okay, let's see here. At the very least, we before we get into, okay, so let's put these element properties at the top. No, we'll leave them like that. Okay. So we have the link on active. It should be red. On hover, you can see the background and the color change, and you can see the cursor changes to a pointer. So we take a look at that markup, and we kind of inspect it a little bit with our dev tools. And let's throw this aside. On the right, we got what do we got? Select this. So we can see here on link, so in order to get those styles, we need to click element classes, or we need to click hover. You can see there that it's not exactly, I can force it. So you can see there that I'm changing. As I'm clicking active, you can see the different markup is changing to red, blue. When I click hover, you can see that class is being changed there, right? Basically, it's taking precedence. The link color is being striked out. It lost the specificity rules, and now we're applying this, right? And if we wanted to change the cursor to something different, we could actually, there's a bunch of ones we could do. We could do crosshairs. So if I wanted to do crosshairs, see there, that crosshair, right? You could change it. There's a bunch of different ones in there. But mostly you're going to see the hand and the pointer and things like that. Maybe you could put scrolling in there. I think there's a scroller. Forget. I can't edit it now. Anyhow, same deal with these ones, right? So if we do, so focus. Active is nothing when I focus. You can see the color there. Hover is nothing. Same with this guy, right? So these guys, they share the same focus. If we wanted to break that out to different colors, we would just break them out, right? We don't need to separate them anymore. If we wanted to give this guy its own focus color, maybe we wanted it to be whatever, I don't know, color, background, color. So then we would break it out if we need to do some extra work. So it's pretty ugly, but that's what it is. Right, so, and you notice up here we have a universal selector because I wanted to put padding between everything, right? Maybe I could improve that a little bit better. You can see it's kind of struck out here for some reason, invalid property. So I already forgot to include those units. So it doesn't like that. So I should have pixels or something beside it. Otherwise it doesn't apply. So I want to put some spacing, and I don't want to use that break tag, HTML tag. And if you don't know what I mean, I don't want to have to walk up to everything here with these tags, right? Which I have. But ideally, I shouldn't need them. I should be able to control everything from CSS. So by putting the PXs, I should put that padding around everything. If I refresh it, it messes it up, right? So it doesn't look that great. So it doesn't look that great. So maybe I need to put some, maybe I do need those break tags. If I don't know how to do inline block or block tags, then then I would have to put break tags in. So maybe we're going to get into display in a little bit, but maybe at this point in time I don't know how to do that. So maybe for now I might need to put those new line tags in, right? Because I don't know how to do it any other way. But maybe I want a little bit more padding. So if you look at that, we're using the padding. We should maybe be using margin, right? So maybe same deal. Maybe I want to put a margin around everything instead of the padding. I'm going to use margin. Spacing in between my boxes. Take a look at that. There I go. See, now I got some spacing going on here. So do I need those break tags still? Probably. See, let's see what happens without those break tags. It'll probably be won't look exactly as I want it to after the other. See, it kind of puts it in that mode, right? So we'll figure out why that happens in a little bit, basically how it's displaying. But for now, we can restore that, create some space around everything. We kind of control the active state, and it looks a little nicer than squished up by default in the way that it is. That's called dynamic classes. All right, so we're going to look at some of that as well. So let's hover, visit an active, and pseudo classes. All right, behavioral pseudo classes. Here, I didn't actually name behavioral pseudo classes, but these are the other ones as well. There's a lot more than them, right? So again, refer to the documentation when needed because there's a lot of different ones here that you may need to, depending on the element you're working with, especially like checkboxes, track the check state, whether or not an input is disabled or not. You could actually, you know, put something in a disabled state. When it's disabled, apply a style to it. Maybe in JavaScript or jQuery or something like that, you may want to disable inputs. Maybe you need to, you know, when somebody enters, maybe they have read-only access, so you need to apply kind of style to indicate that those input fields are not available to enter data into, right? And then some of these other ones we'll look at: last, first class, first child, and last child. All right, so pseudo elements, again, pseudo, interesting name, pseudo classes, pseudo elements. So stuck onto selectors. They basically bolted on, I guess that's another way of saying that. Pseudo classes, taking much like them, they take the form of selector and the element, and the property value, there's 4 of these. So you have content. Now you may see these and be like, I don't understand what they are on first glance. After and before. After and before the element, right? So it basically, you're trying to target the content with CSS. It's kind of cool to be able to do that. So you could target the first and last lines. You could target the first letter. Target the first letter of a paragraph and apply a style to it. That's pretty cool. So you actually have the power to select that first letter in the paragraph and then give it some crazy sized font and make it a lot bigger. You could also target the first line and make it bold. You could also target the last line of the paragraph and do something with it, right? So you have that control to do something like that if you needed to. Selectors. This one you'll see quite a bit. I must say, when I saw this early last year, I had to look it up. To be honest, I either forgot about it or hadn't used it in a long time. So before and after the content, so you're targeting the content. The value of the content property can be an open quote or closed quote. Any string and closed quotation mark of any image or an image name. So the content, effectively, you know the content inside the box model. That's what we're after. But by using this content property, it gives you another box to work with in behind the scenes. When you really get into advanced CSS, you can actually create these things to work off. But block quote, another HTML5 viewer tag, right, to look at. Block quote, I had to look it up myself. MDN. Because I haven't used that in a while, the block quotation. So a block quotation element. So if you put everything in a block quote, you know, you can basically wrap it in quotes, which is pretty useful, right? Instead of manually having to do that, so it does that for you. And then with some CSS, you can target the block quote itself and use it as a selector as you would any other element, right? Target everything that is in a quote in your website and apply this nice background style. So you make that quote stand out from the person who's saying it or whatnot. You know, whether it's a review on Kijiji or Amazon or whatever, there stands out, right? And then you can attach styles to it. And you can see right there, they're using before and after. Sometimes you'll see this double semicolon, which really threw me off. But basically, it's basically how we're getting at the selector, right? So here we have one element, so we have block quote before the quote, and then after the quote. So we are doing something with it, and then we have an LI, so a list item before the LI, and we're going to modify the content. We're gonna add something to it and change the color, and then before the paragraph, before the content of the paragraph, we want to put a picture, right? So what does that look like? It looks like, let's take a look at that. In a way, it's pretty powerful. All right, so let's go to pseudo elements, and we make it look like this. So you can see we are inserting an image. Great show, by the way. Nice space western. I won't ruin it for you, but on Disney Plus. All right, so what does that one look like? Pseudo element. All right, so we have block quote in there. The bounty hunter, blah, blah. All right, so and we have this unordered list, and we have 3 list elements in there, and we want to target them in some way. I have all these tabs open. It's kind of messy, so you can right click, close others, close all other tabs. Focus on this one. Let's take a look at what we got. So before and after, we want to add quotes to it. So at the very least, we have these quotes going on. See there, nothing big there, just put quotes on it. That's cool. And you can see we have this li before. So you can see we have an li that is just 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we can actually, when we do that, we can actually put syntax. The end result will look like this, right? We can actually insert our own content. Maybe we wanted to add like a star beside it or some indicator for some reason. But basically, that's what that does, and we color the background red and the foreground yellow. It looks awful, but that's what this is. POW 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what we're saying is before each paragraph. So we have, I guess, 1 paragraph. I don't know why it's doing it twice, but we have before the content of the paragraph. Throw this picture in. So before the content of the paragraph, and it's kind of interesting. Why is it doing it twice? If we look at the markup on this one here, so it has a before, and then we have. That's interesting. If I take this off, before paragraph before the content. So in some way, it's adding it before this content of the paragraph, but I'm not sure why the selector is adding it to this one. Maybe it's adding it to the li for some reason. But anyhow, that's what that one's doing. If we wanted to get rid of this picture here for a second here, and let's look at this. Let's look at what else we could do, make it more stand out a little bit. So instead of just putting a close quote and open quote in front of everything, maybe we want to do a little bit more. So let's look at this line here, and let's toggle it, see what it looks like. Toggle a line, sorry, untoggle, don't toggle again. Toggle my comment. Oh, untoggle my comment. Oh, it's not working for me. 1, 2, and then I just have to manually go take this out. All right, don't worry about that. You saw nothing. If I refresh this here, you can kind of tell there that kind of see there that the this is kind of annoying. Let me get rid of this. Add a little bit more content to it. Maybe I have another paragraph in here that does something else. Another paragraph that has another block quote. It has another block quote, and this is Plus for $9.99 right now. You can get Disney Plus, and all it has is Star Wars, and that's about it, right? All right, so you can see here that if you look at it, it kind of adds this big quote. It's pretty cool, and it gives us this background, and it kind of, you could basically keep building on this, but it basically, you know, it adds this big quote, kind of makes it stand out more. If I wanted to do something more with it, I could go to my CSS there, and I don't know what I want to do. Maybe I want to change the background to something better than that. I don't know what's better, but blue, violet, so it stands out. See what that looks like. So there you go. It kind of stands out a little bit more. And then after, so you put all this different styling in it. So you can target this and make it stand out. But you're targeting the content, not basically targeting the content, and you can manipulate the target before and after. So you see here, we look at this. Here we are targeting, if we look at our box model here, we are targeting this piece here. And we are adding padding to it, and we're adding styling to the before and after. So we added, before we added this open quote. If we close this piece here, content and open quote, you can see that open quote goes away. We click the after. Actually, we don't have after, but the content open quote, and I think we didn't do anything else after that. But we could target, we could build onto it, right? We could do a whole thing after the fact if we wanted to do a quote after. We could do that as well. So it's a way to target the content before and after. So yeah, that's another way of selecting and having control of your page. If you didn't see it before, it may take a double take for that one. All right, so we are not dealing with Flexbox yet, but Flexbox in that framework, when we do hopefully deal with it, what it kind of deals with is layout. And when you're doing CSS, layout is an interesting problem. In the past, I already showed you the break tags, right? In order to make things flow properly, I had to add those BR tags, which is kind of old school way to generate a line break. To get things to the common problem always in the past was create 3 columns in a page that are all equally in width. So take your 100%. Each column should be exactly 33 point, whatever, 3333. They should all equal to 100. They should all be responsive. That has been an old problem since I can remember working on the web. And I remember trying to do that in many ways. The old school way would be like, hey, I'm so frustrated, let's just put a table in there. Create a table with 3 columns, you're done. Quick and dirty, completely done. After that, when CSS 2, they had an attribute called float. So you could do float right, float left, and then clear. And to be honest, and then controlling the width, it's been a pain for every developer that ever had to do that kind of thing. So in newer versions, they kind of solved that, and with some of these things like Bootstrap and Flexbox and these kind of things, they make it so that you don't have to worry about this stuff. That you can just reference external library and it's out of the box. You don't have to worry, because what happens if you have, instead of 3 columns, you have 10 columns, right? 10 columns for your page. And what happens if 10 columns, maybe 8 of them are the same size, and maybe you have 2 really small or 2 big columns. So how do you do that? How do you calculate those widths? That's a problem. It's very finicky, right? So that's why they made these frameworks. But anyhow, I digress. So common nightmares of a web developer. If you didn't go through it, congratulations. But dealing with display. So when you're dealing with layout, it's a common thing. If you're dealing with React, maybe you need to display your components in a certain way. Maybe you don't want them inline. So you can see here, inline represents how things are flowing. I had to put BR tags to make, because I was trying to get it to work like a stack, like a block, right? So what display is, the browser's default representation of most elements consisting of font, style, margin, pattern is essentially uses display type. So kind of by default, they put it inline, and it can be a real pain in the butt to work with. And you have to figure out when you're dealing with stuff, how do I make it look like this, right? If you don't know how to control the display of it, it can take a bit of a headache, right? And in the past, it was a very major headache to do this, especially if you didn't understand CSS. All right, so the most fundamental types as they have now is inline, block, and none. So they can be manipulated with this display property that, and the shockingly surprising values inline, block, and none. This is inline. Inline boxes. They display horizontally. Inline does exactly what it says. Boxes are displayed in inline. They follow a flow of a line. Inline. Okay, inline. Follow the flow of a line. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. They're all in a line. That makes sense, right? I didn't actually realize that now until I read it. They follow the flow of a line. Okay, that's what it meant. Inline. Inline. Right. But by default, there's no social distancing between the boxes. If you want them to do their part and stand 2 feet apart, you got to put some spacing in between, because they by default they're going to be squished together, right? They're not going to worry about COVID. They're going to be beside each other. So yeah, anchor tags, emphasis. So these elements are all they don't have spacing by default. But if you wanted, so for list items flow downwards. If you want them to all be on the same line, you would do display inline, and you control the default behavior of those tags. Interesting. Let's take a look at that, actually. So if we had our example here with the POW, and we are saying, if we go back to that one, in here we target our LIs and say li display inline. Refresh that. We may need to make it important using that flag. So there you go. So now we overrode the default and put them all in one line. Interesting. So if you needed to display 3 React components and you wanted to put them horizontal, you could certainly do it that way, and that wouldn't be wrong. Or you could flip them back to a portrait view by just removing that attribute, and then they would go back to normal, downward. That's cool. All right, so that's inline. Right. So the other way is what I was trying to get at in the previous example with the break tag was I was trying to get them to display block. So I wanted them to look like this stack. So block makes a standalone box, a box standalone, fitting the entire width of its containing box with an effective line break before and after. How nice. How nice of it. By default, it gives you that stack panel out. If you didn't work on this, if you work on HTML 2 and 3, this is like magic. This is out of the box. You have one tag, one property. This is like, tell your boss it took you a week, and then tell your boss it took 2 days and just bill them, kind of thing. That kind of thing, right? And you can do it right now in one line of code. It's so amazing. 2 weeks. Tell your boss. All right. So unlike inline boxes so you can manipulate the height and the width and the padding. Great for navigation. Hey, I'm building a navigation bar. It's going to take me 3 days, and then I just do this, right? So I'm not kidding. Navigation, and you target the links. You display block, add some padding. Look at that. It's out of the box. It's beautiful, right? Of course, there's another one called none. So you can display none. It seems useless, but it's really great at dynamic effects, especially with animation and especially with modals, right? Because if you don't know the modals, those pop-ups, they're hidden in the background of the HTML markup. Sometimes they're already there, and all it means is when you trigger a click, you just show the modal, and then after you're done, you hide it. You basically control the display. You turn it off. Turn it on, you turn it off. So what you're doing is you're controlling the display property of it. And sometimes that's all it is. Same deal with this thing here. I don't know if I can find it, but it's probably, I forget exactly where it is. Somewhere down there. That type ahead thing, that list is always there, but it's just hiding. So if I look, oh, there it is, right there. If I select that, if I select the thing, and if I look at the styles somewhere in there, it is actually, oh, here it is. So if you look at that, here, let's put this to the left here so you can see it, what I'm talking about. If I take this out, it's there. It's there. Already part of the markup. And it's already set to some value, S, because I think S is in the text box there. But we're hiding it until somebody starts typing. So when somebody starts interacting with the keyboard, then we show it. So that's really all it is. You can tell here the elements basically being removed on the right and left. And that's all it is. It's already part of the markup, but we're triggering it off some behavior. So that's what display none means. If I certainly went and changed this to display inline, then it'll always show up, which might make for a really bad user experience, right? See it switching back if it's always showing. Nobody wants to see that when they're navigating for products, right? Right. So let me look at one example here, a couple more, and then we're done the second deck of slides, which is pretty great, pretty great. So let's look at this one here. What did this one do? I don't know. Did I actually do anything on this one? Take a look. Oh, display elements. It has nothing. Well, that's great. I didn't do that one. Basically, it was navigation of links. What did I say? Navigation. So let's look up what I was trying to do. There's probably a navigation tag I didn't put in. So if you wanted to look at a navigation tag, which is a newer tag for HTML5, pretty nice. Navigation tag. Where is it here? Navigator. I spell it wrong. Navigation tag. Looking at that. Is there a navigation tag? HTML5 navigation. What was I getting at? I forget what I was getting at. Navigation tag. If you want the nav tag. All right. I'm trying to do something like this. Nav tag. So if you have a nav tag, it'll give you this kind of breadcrumb looking thing. See what I was trying to do there. I'm not sure what I was trying to do. But anyhow, you can target the links and make them be blocked. So maybe we don't need a navigation tag. I guess I'm reading what I was trying to do here. Maybe we have a container tag that had an ID of navigation. So it had a navigation ID. Inside of this navigation, I had a bunch of links. Maybe they were, doesn't matter what they are. They could be menu item 1, copy paste that a few times. I don't know what I was doing. Live programming. Somebody's still there. All right, so what I was doing here, let's see if we refresh it. What does it look like? Drum roll, please. And it doesn't look like anything. So navigation, did I spell it right? Navigation block. What happened here? Display inline. I should probably have this markup there. I don't know why I don't. Let's see here. Navigation. Oh, okay. I spelled it wrong. Oh, I don't have it there. I don't know why here. Am I even looking at the right one? 1 second. All right, what am I doing here? Navigation. Let's try to build the spelling backwards here. LI block, display block. Navigation, I'm trying to display the blocks. Navigation related links. Maybe this is helping here. Let's get rid of this one. That was it. Refresh. There you go. Oh, there you go. I was hiding my own work. So what we did there is we grabbed by ID, we grabbed all the links and we put them display block. Gave us a little bit of a menu here. I'm sure we could highlight some other stuff there to make it look like a hover. Add some hover effect. Add some highlighting as you're highlighting the links. It'll change the background. This other piece here, you can see what it was doing. It was grabbing. Basically, it was grabbing the related links and hiding them. So that's what this was causing me a problem, right? Display none, causing an issue. If I didn't have, yeah, so that was actually showing how to hide the links. Wow. All right. So that's a way of doing inline. If I change this to block, if I change this to inline, it should be the same thing. It should put it across by default. Put it in a line, padding. If I walk up to it and put it display none, then it'll give somebody a heart attack because they won't know how to do it. They'll be gone. Not gone, which is still part of the DOM, but just hidden, right? So by default, browser setting. It's hidden. Should still be there. Is it there? Is it there? It is there. It's just hidden. All right, almost done. So I don't have any more slides, but I had one more example I wanted to walk through a little bit. You know what? I will. Yeah, let's actually walk through it. All right. I don't have to do this anymore. Adjacent selectors. Let's take a look at this one. So I have this kind of styling going down the page. Nothing special. I could probably change. I should change the background a little bit better. But so what it is it looks a little different, a little messy because I have a bunch more script tags involved here. I have some other modernizers. I don't really need them, to be honest. I can get rid of some of this stuff. I get rid of some of this stuff here. So I have container, and we don't need this. I was trying to add some foundation script in there, so I don't need that. Let's see if this changes anything. It kind of adds a bit more spacing going down. What's up? If I look at this custom CSS, you can see I gave some element selectors at a height of 100%. What am I doing here? I added some. So you can see right here, I actually removed the bullet points, right? Without this, you would see the bullet points, I believe. No, that. I gave 0 padding. Okay, this type is null. What am I after here? So I centered everything. I gave some padding around everything. And this is what I was after here. So I'm using a different kind of selector. So let's see here. If I give one blue, one red, one violet, whatever. Okay. Black. So if I refresh that, you can see I have this crazy thing going on here, right? So how am I doing that? It's just using one of those other kind of selectors, those element selectors, pseudo selectors. So it's grabbing the unordered list item, the first child, it's saying it's this color, and it's also grabbing the last child. So however many we have, the last child will always be black. And then because I know I have 6, I can actually target the nth child and give it a number and say forever. I can target whatever I want to if I had a static list, right? Most often you don't know the number of items, and you'd probably be using, first and last. However, if you were writing some code, maybe you would pick like odd or even. Maybe you would figure out, is the current row even or odd? Then highlight it and do that as well. Different kind of selectors and more intermediate stuff for sure. All right, so I went over my 45-minute block, which sometimes often happens. Let's take maybe stop the recording first of all. Take about